Hello and welcome to the British Sitcom History Podcast. My name is Alan, but not with me today is Gareth. We have a little break from our normal routine today because we've got someone to interview. A writer by the name of David Scott, who has written a book all about Caroline Aherne, and I asked him here today to tell us all about it. So please, without further ado, please welcome David Scott. Hello. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to talking all things Caroline Aherne and comedy, two of the things I love most.
Excellent. Yes, certainly some things I love as well. So that's very good. So before we do anything else, let's give the book a little bit of a plug. I've got a picture here. We go. Caroline Aherne, Rebel in Disguise. So go on, give us a plug. Where can we get it, first of all?
I mean, you can get it in all major bookstores, I imagine, and obviously the one that's online that's named after a forest. But also, I think you should support more of your indie booksellers where possible. So it's available everywhere, but if you've got an independent bookseller near you, then please go to them first.
Excellent. Before we get into Caroline Aherne, I want to talk all about all her career and the Royle Family, obviously, Mrs Merton, all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, why Caroline Aherne? Why did you come along and write a book about Caroline?
I mean, there's a long-winded answer to it. The first book that I ever wrote was called Mancunians, and it was based around Manchester from 1996 to 2002. And if you look at that period of television of Manchester, it's such a golden period for what was being created. The likes of Cold Feet that were sort of going against the grain of what it meant to be a northerner. It was quite an aspirational piece of television. It showed like Manchester from a different light. You had Queer as Folk, which obviously put Canal Street and which again had such a huge impact on like the people who wanted to be able to express their sexuality without hiding, and that sort of brought a lot of people to Manchester for it. So this whole sort of cultural explosion really with what we were creating television wise, and I think sitting on top of that was the Royle Family, because it was on the face of it was a sitcom where not a lot happened, but she absolutely broke the mold for comedy as far as I'm concerned. And I was kind of hoping somebody would read that book and say, you know, maybe I should write a book about Caroline Aherne, and it never transpired. So the publisher said, well, why don't you do it? So I went, maybe I should, and that sort of led towards it. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Now, Caroline Aherne was, I'm going to use the word victim of sort of tabloid intrusion, and her personal life was kind of splashed all across the place. And you really seem to have not focused on that. You focused on the work, but touched on the personal life where it has played into the work.
Yeah, it was important that I did that. I just for me, from a moral point of view, if I was writing a book about, I'm a Manchester United fan, if I was writing a book about Eric Cantona, it would be about the goals he scored and what he meant to me for what I knew, rather than sort of his personal life. I don't have a huge interest in sort of digging into the cupboards of people's past lives, because again, I think with that, it can become very subjective and hearsay. I think within the book that I've created, it's a very it's my opinion and take on the shows, as well as sort of, you know, on the art that she was creating and the legacy. And you're right in terms of the sort of press treatment. She was hounded out of the country. That's the extent that it got to. If you look at the sort of sensibilities of 2026, where, you know, be kind is sort of almost like a mantra. Whether people stick to it or not is a different matter. But I think we're a little bit more aware about how people are portrayed in the press can affect people. And with regards to Caroline, it took such a toll that she felt she had to leave the country and live in Australia because of it. So
yeah, I think you find a really nice balance in the book of making sure that the troubles she had in her personal life, which did affect her work and went into her writing in a lot of ways, letting that be there without focusing on it, and like you say, without feeling intrusive. I think you found the perfect balance there. Actually, it's really nice.
Oh, thank you for that.
So let's talk about the Royle Family. I want to start there. It's a real jewel in the crown of British sitcom, as far as I'm concerned, but it's not a traditional sitcom in any way.
I mean, in terms of, I'm not an expert in comedy, but in terms of the sort of what I knew at the time to be a sitcom, it was very much at odds, to the point when I first watched it, I thought it was a documentary. I didn't think it was on BBC. I thought it was on Channel 4. Do you know, it just felt like There's almost avant-garde, really, I think. And a few of the reviews I've had, I was tongue-in-cheek and saying I think she should be compared alongside Tolstoy or Shakespeare, but I really think she pushed a button forward in terms of what comedy could be. I'd put her alongside the likes of Beckett and stuff like that. I just think it was a phenomenal piece.
Well, talking about sort of going back to the heritage there, it's Ken Loach, it's Mike Leigh. Those are the very obvious connections, and it's that social realism element that's coming through, isn't it? Definitely. And I also got the impression you're not afraid in the book to kind of be very personal about your own experiences. This isn't like a cold, I'm a historian looking from the outside in. This is a real personal story of your experiences with Caroline Ahern's work as well. And I think we're from quite a similar place in terms of like watching that in the late 90s, and it was like, oh yeah, I know all these people.
Yeah, I mean, we did the book launch last week, and my mum and dad were in the audience, and they weren't too impressed when I said it's just like my family house, the Royle Family, you know. But like, it really was, you know. And like, my mum wore the pants, and sort of like she said when my dad was going to the pub, or not as much as my dad sort of believed that he was ruling the roost. But you make a good point there, is that like social realism, and she loved Abigail's Party, which was the Mike Leigh piece back from when she was such a young girl. And I think with what you see in her career is the outline and then the colouring in and then sort of drafting. And when the Royle Family sort of is all her experiences sort of come together in that piece.
The other thing is the working class representation. So my contention and my kind of overall view of British sitcom history is that it started off as a very working class thing. You got Steptoe and Son on the buses, that sort of thing. And then just as culture changed across Britain, it became much less working class, much more middle class. Because back in the 60s, it was working class people who watched the television. So that's who you were catering for. But by the 90s, that's not really what we've got. I mean, like culture was changing, and then Tony Blair made us all middle class anyway. But this was a real representation of working class, but it doesn't feel like an outsider writing about it. It's from the inside, and it feels very, very honest and very true.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can only get that representation of what it's like to be working class from someone writing who's working class. I think when it's done from someone who's middle class or from a different sort of background, it feels a lot like there's a parody there. I think I mentioned in the book the likes of Catherine Tate and Little Britain, and it was just I didn't find that humorous at all. I found it massively offensive, and it wasn't rooted in, it wasn't realistic at all. And I think there's another example of sort of parodying was Shameless, that sort of came hot on the heels of the Royle Family, which I enjoyed, but that was such a heightened version of what Mancunians were. Whereas I think that the Royle Family just shown, there were so many nuances, and there were so many layers in terms of what she was trying to do. It was everyone knows it as a comedy, but I hope people, when they read the book and they go back and watch the Royle Family, they can sort of see the sort of the hardships and stuff, and why working class people, especially at that time, relied on comedy to get you through that sort of self-deprecating, you know, that behavior. Really, if you look at the scene when Jim's sort of been ridiculed in his own house by Anthony's girlfriend's parents and stuff, but and he can't express his frustrations to his wife or his children or anything, and the only person they can let go of, let steam off to, is baby David upstairs, who hasn't got a clue what his granddad's saying to him, but which is funny. But also, if you look at it again in modern lens, and what's the buzzword with toxic masculinity, or what's it to be a man, that, you know, it's just a lot more depth to the shows, I think, than was really given credit to at the time, and I think that extends across her canon of work.
No, I think you're right there. There's a lot of that, particularly for men, but not being allowed to show your emotions. And what the Royle Family does really well is making sure you understand what emotions they're going through, even if they're not allowed to say it. And you understand the frustrations that people are feeling and all that sort of thing. Yeah, it is wonderful writing. And one other thing I want to acknowledge as well, which you do in the book, is Craig Cash. Because we are focusing on Caroline Aherne today, but Craig Cash was a big part of the writing process, not just for the Royle Family, but for the Mrs Merton stuff as well. Do you know how they met, how they first got together?
Yeah, it was at KFM Radio in Stockport. I think Peel Mill, I think it was called. Yeah, and then Caroline came into the studio, and Craig was working there. And I think the people who were the bosses sort of seeing the chemistry or the banter between the two of them, and then gave them a show quite earlier on. But Caroline used to be the prankster that she is or was, would phone up the show and wind Craig up as a listener. So when Craig would have guests on the show and stuff like that, she pretended to be somebody else and stuff. So yeah, it was very early. But KFM Radio was interesting in terms of a catalyst for talent. If you look at the likes of John Ronson came through there. Obviously, he's a fantastic book career and documentarian. Terry Christian cut his teeth at KFM Radio. It was very much like Granada at the time as well for Manchester and Northern sort of artists. It started as a pirate radio station, and it was sort of and then when it went commercial, I think they got rid of they got rid of Caroline and Craig when they started getting money in, and then that P45 may have come across as a bit of a kick up the arse really when in hindsight, because it forced Caroline to go out on the road and become a comedian.
Yeah. That's great, and like you say, it was a bit of a hotbed, even just in Manchester in general. Like you got Steve Coogan, John Thompson, kind of people they coming through, John Ronson as well, and also that ties into Chris Seavey, isn't it? Like because didn't the Mrs Merton character come from Frank Sidebottom originally?
Yeah. So the original, the first introduction to Mrs Merton came on a spoken word album that Chris Seavey created as Frank Sidebottom, and there's a lot of different names that appeared on that album. It was like very much where he was asking favors from someone, and he knew someone who knew Caroline, and he asked her if she'd jump on this album just to do what would be a cameo really. And I think because I think I liken her to sort of a magpie in the book, is that I think she'd noticed something in the character that could have been fleshed out a lot more. So the idea was Chris Seavey's, but if you listen to that original recording, or if you look at the early sort of Mrs Merton pilots that Caroline written herself that never got to see the light of day, it's like an evolution so much. It's quite twee, the beginning, and then she appears on like local radio, and she's like testing the waters of our boundaries of what is acceptable to say, And then when it becomes such a full-fledged character, when it's primetime BBC, it's like, we're ready now. And then like the celebrities beware, really.
To put that into a bit of time frame, Caroline Aherne and John Thompson were pulled into the Fast Show as this kind of sketch show. Bring your characters. We're all writing it. We're all performing it. But did that raise their profile enough that then something like the Mrs Merton show is more likely to get a green light there?
I think that what actually happened was the Mrs Merton had been commissioned during the same time as when the Fast Show was on air, really, and that's the reason why Caroline's appearances in the Fast Show wasn't as much as some of the other characters like Charlie Hickson and Paul Whitehouse.
Well, I've got a clip actually. This is a clip from the Fast Show, the Janine character. Yeah. And I just pulled this clip because it's so reminiscent of the writing of the Royle Family and the characterization of the Royle Family. So I'll just give you a quick example here.
One time, right, he done this fart on the programme, right? Oh, and he weren't, embarrassed about it or bothered about it. It was just laughing his head off, right? And the cameramen, they were laughing their heads off, right? And me and our Mark, we were laughing our heads off. I mean, you couldn't smell it. I don't know whether Gabby could. She was like pretending, she could waft in the air and all that. Wish I was Gabby.
It's fascinating how similar that is to what we get later on in the Fast Show. There's not punchlines. It's not that it's not funny, but there's not those kind of like those. It's not build up to a joke hit, and then just that little. Oh, I wish I was Gabby Roslin at the end. Like there's this tinge of tragedy there as well. This kind of earnestness, which you definitely get in the Royle Family as well.
Yeah, you certainly do. I mean, our Janine is a complete sort of like she's the germ, isn't she, towards what Denise was when Denise was on the couch. And I think that these like skits that she does where they're black and white, where she's talking about her dad chucking her out of the house because she's got pregnant and stuff like that. And it could be deemed as tragic, but there's also humor in there as well. And once more, it's just a representation of an existence that I was aware of as being working class. But also just from an artistic point of view, she sort of that balance between comedy and tragedy. I just think it's sublime.
Going on from the Fast show, like you're saying, the Mrs Merton character had been there for quite a few years, and indeed they'd had a couple of attempts of pilots before we got to the main show. And now I have got a clip actually from one of those, the one that was made for Yorkshire TV, I think. So let's have a quick look at a sort of proto Mrs Merton before it made its way onto the BBC.
Oh, isn't it funny, you're both working in the radio, and if I may say this, it might sound a bit cruel, but neither of you got nice voices, really.
So that's her interviewing Andy and Liz Kershaw, but it was like, I mean, that's not much different, is it? Like that kind of way of insulting a guest without it being insulting.
Yeah. I mean, and she was a master of that, wasn't she? And I think that's one of the reasons I called the book Rebel in Disguise, is that she also chose her characters really well in terms of the jokes she was telling. If you look at the Sister Mary Immaculate character, it's like you're not going to expect a nun to be talking about sex. You know, she offered such a polarization between the person that was talking about it. You're not going to expect an elderly person to be talking about, God knows, anything at all, really. You didn't know what was going to come out of Mrs. Merton's mouth, did you? But like, because she's so unassuming that it's difficult to sort of push back against it. And I just think that was genius in itself. But yeah, if you look at the set there as well, and I think the music that they have originally on that pilot, I can sort of understand why it didn't get made. But yeah, if you look at that compared to when they're in the actual studio and stuff like that a couple of years later.
And an interesting comparison here, because obviously when we get into the Mrs. Merton show proper, you've got that live audience, and I think that really helps because she's feeding off that energy like a stand-up comedian would, you know. And it also makes the guests feel safer, I think, because it's like, okay, we're all laughing here. We're not laughing at me. We're all laughing together. But that's an interesting comparison with the Royle Family, because the Royle Family, they did, and I only learned this from reading your book, they did attempt a sort of much more traditionally shot on a soundstage in front of an audience pilot. Yeah. And it was a bit of a train wreck, it sounds like.
Yeah. Apparently, I mean, like, I think Caroline was the only person who knows where that the tape of that is. She wanted the one copy, and I think rumors were she sort of buried it in her mum's garden or something like that. But yeah, when it came back, I think that it was just completely at odds with everything that Caroline had envisioned. If you look at what the Royle Family was, and we were likening it before to Mike Leigh and Ken Loach, that sort of almost grain that you can see on the texture when you watch it. Before, it was very much like, from what I've heard, I've been told, it was like a very much glossy. If you look at the other sitcoms that were out at the time, we're looking at the world of Friends or Sex and the City and stuff like that. So I just can't imagine the Royle Family in that sort of sheen. You know, if you put, it's like being put through an Instagram filter or something like that.
I would be fascinated to see it, just out of curiosity. But yeah, I'm sure it doesn't work. But that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like we're talking about how Royle Family kind of is groundbreaking the way it's shot, but perhaps it was less of a kind of an artistic choice, but it's actually baked into the concept because it's obviously been written with that in mind, even if it wasn't very consciously written with that in mind. If you are of a mentality of like, we're going to do a Ken Loach style sitcom, so it's almost necessary. But pulling back to Mrs. Merton, to sort of go along the chronology of Caroline Ahерne's career, Mrs. Merton, probably the first really like nationally known now, and went beyond like, now you're an actor and comedian, like you're a star, right? This was the star making role, and this is something different. It is a chat show, and in a lot of ways it's a traditional chat show, but the host is a comedy character. Everybody knows, and we're not quite acknowledging it.
And to do that for your first show as well is just so, you don't know how they're going to react. But you said before that the audience made the guests feel safe. I would look at it a different way myself, is because if you've got a live audience in there and you don't take the joke well as a celebrity, and you look like a bit of like an arsehole. You know what I mean? The audience is there, so you sort of, it's a clever move on her part, because you can't get off, can you? You
got to play along, right? Yeah.
What was fascinating about Mrs Merton as just for a chat show concept is that if you watch things like, I don't know, Jonathan Ross or Chris Evans on TFI Friday at the time, is that you would get guests to come on shows because they were plugging something. Like I'm on this show now because I'm plugging my book, but people would go on to Mrs Merton and they weren't selling anything. George Best didn't have a reason to go onto the Mrs Merton show, but like it became such a successful thing that it became like almost a Groucho club, because everybody wanted to be seen on Mrs Merton. And I think the problem with that is that when everyone's in on the joke, it sort of it dilutes it. When early doors, when you're looking at the sort of episodes with Debbie McGee in particular, it's like straight out the gate, she's like, asking a question that reporters were scared to ask for years, but everyone in a laundry or cafe was gossiping about.
It's a great moment, that, and I hadn't realized until I went back and kind of rewatched some stuff in prep for this, that's episode 1.
Yeah,
is the infamous Debbie McGee moment, and it's a beautiful example. I pulled a few clips and I thought I'm not going to pull the classic clips because it's just too easy, isn't it? But the question is, so Debbie, what first attracted you to the millionaire Paul Daniels? It's delivered perfectly. It gets a big laugh, and Debbie McGee laughs along with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beautiful part of it. And Debbie doesn't feel like, oh, I actually have to answer that question as if it's a sincere question. We kind of laugh it off, and then we talk about other things. Yeah, and I have pulled a clip here actually from the Mrs Merton show, and I just found this a really good example. It's Martin Clunes being interviewed. So I'll find a sitcom actor being interviewed. That's a nice way of keeping it sitcom. But what I really like about this is Martin Clunes is absolutely, he's playing along with it. It's all in good humor, but he's still completely off kilter, and he just can't keep up with it. And that's how disarming this character is. So here's a quick clip.
So, any little clunges on the way?
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Or would it? I don't know. Yes, I'd like it.
Any problems down there in that department? Any little hiccups that we should know about?
I'll keep you filled in.
I'm sure you will.
So I just thought that was a nice example of the good-natured ribbing sort of vibe of it. But even if you're absolutely on board and you want to play along, it's still like you never quite know where you are or what's coming next.
No, she's just like, she's so quick. Like when people come back to her, it's just straight away. It's like a ping pong almost, just like straight away firing back to her. And I think the longer you carried it going on, is like you may run out of ammunition and you're going to be the one left with egg on your face. It's just just as a cultural timestamp, I just think it's such a fascinating piece of work.
Yeah. Just before we move on from that, I want to talk a little bit about the legacy of Caroline Aherne, because it very much struck me thinking about this, Mrs Merton character particularly, the character of Philomena Kunk, Diane Morgan's character, which feels like it, without putting too much weight onto that, owes a lot to that kind of style, and again, that kind of in-character interviewing. Yeah. And it feels different, it's a kind of a more modern take on that. But the one thing that really made me think of it is, Philomena Kunk always goes about, my mate Paul did this. And when rewatching Mrs Merton, which I guess I haven't watched for a while, she always talks about, my friend Lily did this, my friend Lily did that. And I thought that was a nice sort of very direct comparison there.
Yeah, and I'd like Diane Morgan herself has sort of mentioned how much Caroline Aherne was an influence on her as well, the Royle Family. And I don't think I'd be wrong to say there's definitely a lineage there to Diane Morgan's work and stuff. And I mean that's absolutely brilliant. And the stuff regarding my mate or so and so, the amount of invisible characters that you got in Caroline's sort of canon of work, an early idea I had with the publishers was to try and create like this family tree of people we don't see on screen, just to try and create this sort of world.
Like Beverly Macker.
Yeah, Beverly Macker, I just found it fascinating. But that's how people spoke The amount of
Yeah.
stories my mum will tell me about people I've never met. It's how people really communicate.
And all the characters always have these nicknames, like Larry Grayson style, isn't it? Like Slack
Yeah.
Alice, or like, yeah, it's really funny. But yeah, so in terms of legacy, again, I think you're right. Like the people who grew up watching Royle Family, and when that like 10, 15, 20 years later are the ones making the TV shows. So you're getting stuff like This Country, I think, is a really good example where that lineage is definitely felt. And I think because TV in general, for whatever reason, has moved away from traditional sitcom and into a bit more single camera, no laugh track kind of vibe, that legacy is being felt even more, I would say.
Yeah.
Even where it's not like very obviously direct, and that working class representation as well, and kind of like, oh, we are interesting, and you don't have to go to Oxford University to be able to prove it.
Yeah. I think as well, it's the change in the sort of with the digital landscape nowadays. I think that there's an awful lot in terms of what we lost with Caroline's and time the passing, but it's like, what would she have created with what was available now? Do you know what I mean? How would she have sort of changed, sort of stuff? But you go back, just to quickly go back to the Fast Show. I think Charlie Higson says if you look at what TikTok is, the Fast Show was doing back in 1992, really, with skits and stuff.
Yeah, very just fast. It's fast. That's the whole point, right? It's quick. Yeah. Now, one more big sitcom related thing I want to talk about is Mrs Merton and Malcolm, which was an attempt to make a sitcom with the Mrs Merton character. And it only did one series and didn't really do very good business, but it kind of came hot off the heels of the Royle Family, like between series 1 and 2 of the Royle Family, I think it was. Now, I think it's seen as a bit of a failure. I rewatched Mrs Merton and Malcolm just the other day because I was like, I'm prepping for all this, and I fell into a Caroline Aherne kind of hole, but in a good way, right? But I honestly quite like Mrs Merton and Malcolm. I understand why elements of it don't work, but it's remarkable how similar it is in tone to the Royle Family.
Yeah.
But I think the big issue there is that it doesn't have the same sense of reality, because those characters are a little bit broader, they're a little bit more kind of caricatured. And that's fine, it's funny, but then you put it into this social realism tone that we're used to with the Royle Family, and it's just off somehow. And I think that's why it doesn't quite come together.
Yeah. I think if she'd done Mrs Merton and Malcolm, and I should have said this in the book, but after the facts, you know, hindsight's a great thing. But I think if she'd have done Mrs Merton and Malcolm between Mrs Merton Chat Show and the Royle Family, I think it would have landed a hell of a lot more. But I also think if she'd have done it in that way, then I think it would have been a hell of a lot harder to get the Royle Family made.
But it makes sense, doesn't it? It feels like it makes sense that way, because you feel like there's this progression. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I did pull a clip of this, mostly because I wanted to show Brian Murphy. I actually think this is one of Brian Murphy's best roles. Like, he's a obviously very reliable comedy actor, but I think it's spot on here. And honestly, you know, we talked a lot about the different influences and things like that. Mrs Merton and Malcolm, and I think it's because of that mother-son bonding. It reminds me of Alan Bennett, but it doesn't quite have the kind of philosophical leanings. I think it doesn't have the depth, but it reminds me of that, and I think maybe that's why I like it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm a huge Alan Bennett fan, and I know Caroline was a big Alan Bennett fan as well as she was of all sort of sitcoms and stuff. And this, there was too much ambiguity. Like the mother and daughter relationship, mother and son relationship, and then is it like Last of the Summer Wine? It's almost got that sort, but it's not twee enough, because it's sort of, you can see a little twinkle in her eyes, and then you've got the dad upstairs. Okay, are we going down a more sort of absurd, morbid thing? Oh no, we've not, because we've got Mr. Capstick coming around to tell, and it was just, it didn't feel bold enough to go in any one direction. And I think with I think I mentioned this in the book, with the likes of The League of Gentlemen, I just love the idea that Mrs Merton might have been a little bit more sinister. Do you know, like just really gone for it? I think that would have been fantastic.
I know what you mean, though. I think maybe it would have worked better if it was like, yeah, look, it's 1967, like, and kind of really, because it feels like it is anyway.
Yeah.
So maybe that would have helped to find that. I'm just going to show a little clip just as a demonstration of the nice dialogue they have.
I was round at Peggy Gosworth's last night. Her Gordon's fixed one of them security lights in her back garden.
Security lights? Oh, what's she got one of them for? She's only got that so people think she's got something worth stealing.
What's a security light, Mr. Capstick?
It's for when a burglar comes into your back garden, they go on. Doesn't work properly, though. I went outside to have a look at it and it came on. I've never stolen anything in my life.
Oh, dear.
I mean, that you put that exact dialogue into the Royle Family, and it would make perfect sense, you know. And I think the writing is there, but just like the overall picture and some of the broader character elements, and particularly like the Malcolm is so kind of cartoonishly silly that it doesn't quite work. But I do have a bit of a soft spot for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great stuff in there, but I think the legacy of Mrs. Merton and Malcolm is that Malcolm morphs into Dave Best towards the latter stages of the Royle Family.
Yeah, definitely.
Better or worse?
Well, I think I rewatched some of the later Royle Families because I think I've watched the series like over and over again. But those later specials, I kind of rewatched them, and there's definitely what they call Flanderization, right, of the characters, where and particularly. Denise and David, they just get so stupid and ridiculous that it no longer has that reality, and I think that's what it loses.
Yeah, and
I think it's probably important to know. I still found it funny, and it was always still entertaining. But it's just lost that edge of oh my god, I know these people and I've seen these people in my real life.
Yeah, and I do wonder when I watched the later series, what was the sort of thinking behind it? Did they feel that they had to sort of maybe embellish the characters, or did they get bored with them, or what was the reason? They did seem sort of the later versions of Denise and Dave seemed to be everything that they were rebelling against in an artistic way at the beginning. They turned more a lot into sort of was it Harry Enfield's The Slobs, Henry and Henrietta? They morph, whereas early Denise and Dave. Yes, they were lazy and stuff, but they were sharp. You know, they were very, very, very quick with it, and there was a lot more sort of gradient to the characters, and it just turned into more of a parody. The sort of later as the series went on,
and it also some of the scenarios become more overtly comedic, and some of the sort of the scenes that play out. I've got one more clip though, actually, just to appreciate the Royle Family here. This is from one of the later specials. It's when they're at David and Denise's house having Christmas, and it is a bit over the top and silly, but I really like this bit where Caroline Aherne is having Denise is having a bit of a breakdown about everything going wrong, and she's ranting at Dave. And I pulled this clip. This is like 20 seconds or something of a 1 minute 20 second, like where she's just blah 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 blah, and it's a really lovely bit. But I'm going to play you a bit of it just to give us a taste.
Trust you, Dave, to win a bloody turkey that we can't get in the oven, and only got 2 legs, and you know everybody wanted a leg off of that turkey, and all you're doing is mingling in your piano ties. All you want to be in there mingling with that bloody piano tie, and everybody mingle best. That's what you should be. Mingling should be in middle name, and no, not a man, because when I said who wants triangles and who wants oblongs, any man would have said, oh, just have oblongs, or just have triangles.
So, like I said, I couldn't pull the full clip because it was like a minute and a half long of her just doing that. And it's obviously at least partially improvised because she just sort of like suddenly sees the piano ties and have a go at that. But I love the bit where she goes, and you're not a man, because, and then the reasons for that are just totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was just a good, I pulled that clip because it was just Caroline Aherne, like just really on her own. But it was also from those later episodes, there was still a lot of gold there. And even though, perhaps overall they weren't quite but you're comparing them to the original 3 series of the Royle Family. It's flawless. It's you know, it is perfect. So you know, there's no way you can keep that kind of thing up forever, right?
No, not at all. I mean, if you look at the Queen of Sheba as being not only the peak of maybe Caroline's career, not only being the peak of the Royle Family, arguably being the peak of British TV. There's only where do you go after you've reached Everest? You know, there's like where do you go?
That's a good example because it's that balance of comedy and drama.
Yeah.
Which I mean, the most great, the really well remembered great comedies do have those elements, because it's not just, oh, it's funny, it's some gags. We are connecting with people on a human level.
Yeah.
And so the Queen of Sheba, just for anyone's not sure, it's where Nana eventually, over the course of the episode, she dies, and yeah, it's quite brutally sad for a lot of it, you know. And it does allow that self a few minutes to pull back and experience that, but we're never far away from a joke. We're never far away from that. And there's a whole wake scene where they decide, like, well, oh, come on, let's not be sad. Let's celebrate it. And you know, they have a nice piss up at Nana's memory, which is what she would have wanted. But like, we've all been there, right? We can all kind of associate with that and that grief. We've all felt grief in some way.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned it in the book, is that my granddad passed away while I was writing it, and his death was seismic in the family, but we laughed so much at his funeral. Do you know what I mean? It was not because of his passing, but because like of the memories and stuff like that, and that's how you get through it. And you make a great point regarding the comedy. The best comedy also always has a through line of tragedy or drama or anything at all. It can't be just like, you know, slapstick hitting you over the head. It has to have depth to it, and I think that's why Caroline's work will stand the test of time.
Now, I do want to talk about what I would refer to as the later work. So basically everything that came after, probably about 2000, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, to acknowledge something we were talking about earlier, Caroline essentially ran away because of the stresses and strains of life, and in a multitude of ways. It seems like her personal life had a bit of tumult, you know, marriage and divorce and all this sort of thing. But also the stresses of fame. It does feel like fame never sat well on Caroline's shoulders, did it?
No, I mean, she said herself that fame's not a game I'm very good at, or she was shit at being a celebrity and stuff like that. I just find it's the gift and a curse, isn't it, really, that you become successful at something that you've always wanted to, you know, wanted to be a writer or a performer from such a young age, and you manage to reach sort of heights that society didn't expect for you, or maybe your own sort of limitations. And what comes with it is that you have to sort of run away or escape from it, and it's the pitfalls of fame. And I think, you know, Caroline was certainly a victim of it. She wasn't alone in that.
I mean, running away to Australia literally is kind of like, how far away can I get from this situation? Yeah. I understand that, you know. I think we've all been there at some point or another, haven't we? Yeah. But she actually had to do it because those problems were real and tangible. And like, you walk out your door and it's an issue. But let's dwell on kind of the creative things that came out of that, because what she ended up doing in Australia was a sitcom called Dossa and Joe.
Yeah.
Now, I must admit, I'd never seen this. I've only watched one episode of it just because I thought, oh, I'll get a taste of it. And it very much, like, if you were going to say the Royle Family in Australia, like this, it's very similar ingredients. It doesn't work as well for me somehow. Like I say, I didn't watch the whole thing, so you know. But I mean, well, okay. Let me just ask you straight out, what are your thoughts on Dossa and Joe? How do you take
it? Compared to the Royle Family, it doesn't work. There's too much of the sort of acting that we found in Mrs Merton and Malcolm and some of the characters, but some of the writing towards the later episodes was brilliant. And it's the if you don't watch it as a comedy and more of a sort of drama about this couple, for people who haven't seen it, the premise is that Joe's just about to retire from work. Dossa's been a housewife all her life, and they're very different people, and they only really communicate when he comes home from work, and they've got the 5 hours in the evening type of thing. But it all relates around the the marriage counsellors. They're doing therapy for the marriage and stuff like that. So a lot of it is sort of in Joe's head, which was different compared to something she hadn't done that before, where a lot of the like you hear Joe's in a monologue, which I found was quite interesting. And if you look at what came later with the Peep Show and stuff like that, it's very similar to that. And I think with her sort of her move to Australia, she decided that she wanted to maybe do more sort of drama-based stuff, and so some of the writers we spoke to earlier on, I think that was her trying her arm at it. Wasn't successful, but I think she just needed to maybe prove to herself that she could still do it. It's not as bad as Mrs Merton and Malcolm for my money.
Well, do you know what part of that might be is because I'm watching this obviously as a British person. I wonder if you were an Australian person watching that, you would find more recognition, more like, oh yeah, I work with a guy like that, or whatever it is. But you raise an interesting point there. This is so the main two characters in the show, Michael Caton, I think it's pronounced, and Anne Charleston. Now, I know both of those from other things. I mean, Anne Charleston was Madge in Neighbours, so I grew up with that. But and Michael Caton's done a fair few films and things, but they're both excellent actors. But this raises the point of something we've said on our show quite a lot, looking at sitcoms, is the things you really need for a successful show is the writing and the casting. Those are the main things. If you've got a good script, you can do a lot with it. But sometimes the perfect cast will lift anything. And I think we got that with the Royle Family. And it's easy to look at someone's overall work and go, oh, this isn't as good as that, is it? Sometimes everything comes together just perfectly. It's the right time, it's the right place. And I think that's what we got the Royle Family. But the casting, obviously that is not just by chance they've cast these people, but it is perfect. And it sounds like from what you've read in the book, your research has shown that they were as much a family off set as they were on.
The Royle Family were, exactly. I mean, if you look at the sort of tributes in her passing, they were heartbroken. But yeah, some of the antics that they got off stage and stuff like that, were sort of winding each other up by replacing boom mics with loaves of bread, and just having naughty steps for anyone messing around. And filming used to go on for so long because they were all just pranking each other. And like you said, it was just a perfect sort of collection, really, and as an ensemble piece. Like I said, everyone from there, maybe regardless of not Ralph Little, but everybody else had, they cut the teeth in Brookside or whatever with Stu and Ricky, and I think Liz Smith as well. You said before was in like Mike Lee stuff. I think she'd earmarked them early on down the line and said, if one day I get to do my sitcom, this is that they're going to be in it. So if you look at Dossa and Joe, she's in a completely different landscape, whether it resonated with Australian people or not. I would probably err on the side of maybe it didn't, because she wouldn't be as au fait with Australian lifestyle. I've lived somewhere for 2 years, doesn't mean that I know the sort of the intricacies about how they act. It's also interesting in that it was the first time Caroline had written in something and she wasn't starring in it, so that was different. It was also the first time that she wasn't working with Craig Cash as well, so you wonder how much sort of that had an impact on why Dossa and Joe didn't work so well.
Yeah, and you're talking in the book that she was having at least something of a crisis of confidence at this point. Like, can I do this anymore? So, like you're saying, maybe it was just a matter of making something and going, okay, look, I can do this. I can write still, and hopefully, at least it achieved that, because she did go on to write some other things.
Yeah, she certainly did, and I think I'm a writer myself, and I think that I'm friends with most creatives, and it's a compulsion. I don't think when you're that talented that you could put down the pen. Do you know, it's like I just can't imagine her doing anything else, really. Yeah.
So I want to look at the last couple of things that she kind of, as a writer, did, because there's two things left, and I hadn't seen either of them, and so I went out of my way to watch them. So the first one being The Fattest Man in Britain. Now, what you were saying about moving more towards drama and comedy drama, The Fattest Man in Britain was essentially a TV movie. It's like a 90-minute thing, starring Timothy Spall as the fattest man in Britain. Just for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's, the guy's the fattest man in Britain, but that's not really that relevant. It just means he's a bit of a shut-in, and he finds this moment of connection with a young woman who's been sent to him to do community service. Yeah, and through helping her, he kind of finds a little bit of humanity for himself again, which he'd lost.
Yeah,
That's
so it's all about. It's not, yeah, I found it like a lot about like sort of identity and who you are, and like and if you use it as a sort of maybe a mirror towards Caroline's career, it's like, who are you without the thing that people know you for? Timothy Spall's character was known just because he's fat. You know, who's Caroline when she isn't the person who's writing the Royle Family? So I sort of see it as being maybe an analogy towards her own career. But Timothy Spall's performance, and that's outstanding. The thing with that, it's not dated very well in terms of the sense of humor. There's a few jokes in there that you would not see on TV today.
Yeah, get that. I noticed a bit of that in the Royle Family. Actually, rewatching Jim definitely says a few things like, "Yeah, you wouldn't put that in a script these days." But like it again, it's nothing that your dad wouldn't have said in 1998. You know what I mean? One last thing as well. One last thing is the security men. Yeah. Now, could you tell me about this, because it's sort of a little self-contained 40-odd minute thing, but was it a pilot for a series?
It was a pilot for a series, and I think that it stayed on the shelf for 2 years before it actually got aired. I'm not too sure what the reason was behind that, whether that was down to Caroline's illness. But yeah, it's these like 4 layabout security men. I think it's Stretford Mall, maybe it's sort of set in, or a Northern Mall, and they plan like a diamond heist to sort of get their jobs back. But it's it just felt Northern by numbers. It was just very crass, and it's like, you may as well. It's like, people love Peter Kay. I'm not gonna like. It's like garlic bread. It's like garlic bread on a mobility scooter. If you, do you know, that'll make sense. You know what I mean? It just felt like it was very obvious jokes.
It's much broader. It's much broader, definitely. Yeah, and the problem with that is you are coming. This is coming 10, 13 years after Phoenix Nights, for example. So what are you bringing new to the table there? Or you either that, or you have to get it right. Another thing we've noted about Peter Kay when we looked at Phoenix Nights is how much he pulls his characters from reality. And in fact, Peter Kay literally would tape record people. Like, he put a tape recorder on this family dinner table, and so it was, those characters come from a really place of reality. And I think you could probably make the same argument of Peter Kay as his career has gone on. Does that well dry up, and you have to kind of start creating more, especially if you've been removed from that world that you grew up in?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem with being a successful artist, isn't it? Because I think the rule is always write what you know, and the reason that their earlier shows were successful is because what they knew was a world that everybody belongs to, where you're a millionaire who wins BAFTAs and stuff like that, and your world revolves around Notting Hill and the Groucho Club. That's quite a select. So not many people can relate to that world. So you do really have to maybe think outside the box, and it could be a case of like they couldn't draw from that well anymore, and society had moved on. If you think about it, like Caroline wouldn't have been working class for 20 odd years by that point, maybe.
Sure,
you know what I mean? So she by that point she's outside of the world that she's talking to or talking about.
Yeah, or you are stuck in a time. You're stuck in that time in the 80s, 90s when you grew up.
Yeah.
And like, okay, that's the world I know, the working class world I know. So it's difficult the further away you get from that. You are sort of distanced from it, aren't you? Yeah. So I mean, we've done a pretty good job there. We've kind of covered Caroline Ahерne's entire work, which was nice. But I've kind of been watching this over the last few weeks and refamiliarizing myself with, and some of it was new to me, which was great. And all that was because I read your book. Let's give it another plug before we finish.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Rebel in, I think I've got I only got a copy this week. It's been out for 2 weeks. Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, yes, lovely stuff. Yes.
It's out wherever you get books nowadays.
So it's Rebel in Disguise, Caroline Aherne, Rebel in Disguise by David Scott. So that's the thing to search for. But just to kind of take us out here, it really is amazing when you look at Caroline Aherne that she has been she has been kind of the fundamental part of 2 major kind of what I would call groundbreaking comedy events in Britain. So you got Mrs Merton, who, again, that kind of comedy chat show, it was not something that was being done at the time. There's not a lot of lineage for it. It was totally different, and they were kind of brave enough to kind of go, let's make this work. And then the Royle Family, which is not only different from that, and so represents quite a bold move as a creative, but also was really going against the general vibe of what sitcom was at the time, and was a massive success. Absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And to have two major points of legacy in your career and life is something we all aspire to. Yeah. So really, Caroline Ahерne's work is really fantastic, and her legacy continues to be felt today. Especially in your house, it seems, because you obviously it's had an effect on you personally.
It certainly did. Although after writing the book, I don't think I can watch a Royle Family until Christmas time now.
Yeah. Well, David Scott, thank you very much for coming on and discussing all Caroline Ahерne's work with us. I hope the book goes very well and we get lots of nice reviews for you and everything. Please, anyone who's watching this, go out and buy the book. It is a really interesting read. It has a nice, just enough of a personal story from you without it being intrusive, but like we understand why you care and why you want to write about this. I think it's generally very nicely balanced, the whole book. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on. I loved it.
Great. And we will be back onto our normal routine later this week. Thank you all very much for listening.